Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel if you've been around. My name's Dineo. I am doing a little bit of a different video today. Also, it is about to thunderstorm, so if the lighting changes and it gets really dark in here, that is why. I am filming my mid-year reading wrap-up. So I have all my books, but I'm going to go over the books that I've read. I have read a total of 12 books so far this year. I'm going to tell you right now that I am going to use a 1 to 10 rating scale. I personally feel like the 1 to 5 star rating scale is just like too small. I feel like there's certain books where I'm like, I don't want to give it a 1 because that insinuates that I hated it, but I didn't hate it. Or there's books that I'm like, I don't think it's necessarily a 5, but I feel like a 4 means I didn't love it. So I feel like it's too small. So I'm going to use a 1 to 10 scale. Sorry if that throws it off, but I'm also going to explain my ratings so you'll get the gist of why I'm giving it out of 10. So the first book that I read this year is probably one of my favorite books, Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Malibu Rising is about the Riva family who live in Malibu, California. So they live off the Pacific Coast Highway, I believe, because they talk about the PCH all the time. The Riva family, there's 4 siblings, Nina, Jay, Hud, and Kit. And every single year at the end of the summer, they have a giant party. And now this party is the party to end all parties. If you're invited, it means you've made it in the California Hollywood light, because each of the Riva family is very famous. All the siblings are very famous. Their dad, Mick Riva, is a famous singer. The book takes place during the Riva's end of the summer party, and the book takes place in the course of 24 hours. So the first half of the book is day to night, and then the second half of the book is night to day. But a lot of things go on at this party. All the Riva siblings have secrets that they're hiding, and as the party goes on, the party just gets crazier and crazier. Secrets get revealed. What I really like about the book is it alternates between past and present. So pretty much there's one chapter which explains 1 hour of the day, and then it goes to the past. So you're kind of learning about what's currently going on in the Riva's lives, but it's also going back to the past and kind of explaining their childhood and all that stuff. So the book overall is really about family relationships, and just kind of finding yourself, I guess. I finished this book, I think, in the course of 2 days. I loved this book. I gave it a 9 out of 10. The reason for my rating is mainly that I personally loved the way that Taylor Jenkins Reid wrote. I've read a lot of her books, which I will talk about later, but I feel this is by far my favorite book of hers that I've read. I just love the way she writes. I feel there were so many good quotes in the book that I just was oh my god, I know this feeling and all that stuff. And I feel another reason I also gave it a 9 out of 10 is this is a book I would definitely reread. I just love the characters. I felt I was able to relate to a little bit of each of the Riva siblings, and even Mick Riva. And I just also love that it takes place in Malibu. I've always wanted to go to California, so part of me was oh my god, this is what my life could be like if I were in California. I could be attending these crazy parties. After Malibu Rising, I actually read I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Iain Reid, which I don't have the book because unfortunately I returned it. So here's why. I'm Thinking of Ending Things is supposed to be a psychological thriller book, which I definitely did not know this. There was no blurb. There was nothing that told me about this book. I just picked it up. The title was interesting. Started reading the first chapter. I was very invested. Bought the book. It's basically about this girl who I'm pretty sure we don't get the girl's name, but we get the guy's name. I don't remember his name right now. I'm pretty sure it's Jason. The book is told from his girlfriend's point of view, and they're going on this trip to visit his parents. So they've been in a relationship for a couple of months. Once again, this book kind of alternates between past and present. So the book kind of starts with them on their way to his parents' house to meet the Brents, and then it also flashes back to the past where she's kind of explaining how they got in a relationship and their history and stuff like that. But It's a psychological thriller, so it kind of keeps you on your toes. There's a lot of weird stuff happening. I think I'm Thinking of Ending Things definitely does a good job of like drawing the reader in, because from the get-go you're very much like in suspense and you're like scared. You're like, oh my gosh, like what's gonna happen? I have to keep reading because I don't know what's gonna happen. I will say that the ending of the book is kind of what made me hate it. I feel like the ending just did not make sense to me at all. And I like went back and I was like, really? Like that's how we're going to explain the 200 pages that I just read. So I'm Thinking of Ending Things, I gave a 0, hence why I returned it. I just like don't think I would read that book again. I still don't really understand like what happened. It's also just a little weird because I was not expecting it to be a psychological thriller. I thought it was just going to be like a novel about like relationships, because it was like I'm thinking of ending things. It's about this couple like going to meet the guy's parents, so I thought it was like they're breaking up, and that's not how it is at all. There is a Netflix movie based off the book that's been made. If any of you have read the book and have other thoughts, or seen the movie and have other thoughts, comment down below. I'm genuinely curious. After that, I decided I need a little bit of a pick-me-up book, so I read November 9th by Colleen Hoover. It is about Fallon and Ben. Fallon, at the beginning of the book, is at lunch with her dad, and this is the day before she's supposed to move across the country. So she lives in LA and she's moving to New York, and she's meeting with her dad for lunch, and they do not have a good relationship, and she's like trying to explain to him why she's moving across the country, and like just trying to like reach out to him and kind of connect before she moves across the country and is no longer near him. And the lunch is not going well at all. Then there's this guy named Ben who is sitting at a different table and like overhears the conversation, and he actually ends up sliding into the booth next to Fallon and pretending to be her boyfriend to try and like help her out and like ease the conversation that's going on with her dad. After the dad leaves, Fallon and Ben kind of get to talking, and Fallon learns that Ben is a novelist and he is looking for inspiration for his new novel. And so he starts to kind of draw inspiration from Fallon's life and from talking to her. And so they become friends, and they eventually decide, because Fallon's leaving, that they are going to meet every year for one day on November 9th, the day that they met every year, and like just catch up and talk. But during the year, they have no contact with each other. They can't follow each other on social media. They don't have each other's number. And like the way that they end up meeting up is like every November 9, they like plan their next meeting. The book just follows like their love story, and you learn a lot about like both Fallon and Ben, which I will say I was very invested in this book just because like their romance is just kind of clear from the beginning that they have this connection, and it's very interesting to see how like the connection changes and evolves because they're not seeing each other other than this one day a year, which is just like such a bizarre theory. And the way that it like works, like I always was kind of wondering, I was like, is one of them gonna crack and like look someone up on Instagram? But like it's a very interesting book. But I will say Ben is definitely a flawed character, but obviously no character is gonna be perfect, no person's gonna be perfect. There's like a major plot twist at the end. I think this book is meant to be like a young adult book, so it's not necessarily like very developed. I gave it a 6.5 out of 10 just because I felt like there were a lot of cliches in the book, and I'm not a big person on like cliche cheesy romance, but I will say that like both Ben and Fallon kind of poke at the cliches that are happening between the two of them, which almost made it a little nicer, because it was like at first you would read it and be like, oh my god, this is so cliche, but then they themselves, like the characters, would poke at it and you were kind of like, oh okay, like it's kind of funny. This book did keep me engaged. I think I finished it in like 2 days. I will say the plot twist kind of like ruined it for me, and then also like Ben being a flawed character, the cliches, it being kind of like a younger, it's like a quick nice read, and that's why I gave it a 6.5. Like I would definitely reread parts of this book, but I wouldn't reread the whole book. And like I said, I just wasn't really a fan of the writing for this. It didn't feel very like advanced and like thought-provoking. Next book, Normal People. Oh my goodness, with this book. Every time people told me like what this book was about, I was like, just not really for me. But when I tell you, this book had me in a chokehold, This book had me in a chokehold. I also watched the Hulu series after I read the book, and being like a film major, I like really loved the film. I feel like Normal People is the only like TV film adaptation where it is so perfect, and I feel like part of the reason it's so good is because it literally, some of the scenes in the TV show are the exact scenes from the book, like the exact wording. This book is about Connell and Marianne, who both, I believe, live in Ireland. It starts when Marianne and Connell are in high school. Connell and Marianne actually grew up in the same hometown and go to the same school, but they have a very different dynamic. Connell's mother works for Marianne's family as like a house assistant, and Connell is kind of like the opposite of Marianne. They're both very smart, so they're in a lot of the same classes, but Marianne's kind of like a loner, but it's clear that like they both kind of have like an attraction for each other. The book actually ends like after they've graduated college, but the book kind of goes over like the course of their lives, like them becoming friends and then becoming like lovers and then like not lovers and just friends and all this stuff. But it's basically going over how like these two are always connected, and it's like really interesting to see just like how, you know, people can come in and out of your life and still affect and change your life, which I think is really awesome. In watching their relationship unfold, there were some parts where I was like, why can't they just get together? Like, they're so close. But then there were also points where I was like, they can't be together because it's just not going to work right now. I think I almost cried actually when I read the ending, because I was like, what? I love this book. This is literally a work of genius. The writing is amazing. It's very, very, very realistic. And towards the middle, it kind of gets a little slow. I started to kind of lose interest and not want to read as much. But I think what I realized is like the reason why it was getting slow is because those like subplots are really like coming to fruition. I think that's also part of the realistic aspect of it. Like sometimes in life, like, you know, relationships are like a slow build. So I think when I first read it, I gave it a 7 out of 10. But honestly, I feel like I'll give it an 8 out of 10 now. It's definitely not like my favorite book, but it's such a good book. Here's where the controversy comes in. 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, another Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I have to choose my words carefully here. I definitely did not like this book. I'm going to start by saying that. But I don't want to slander it, because that is not nice. I also have heard that some people like love 7 Husbands and don't like Malibu Rising at all, and I've also heard there's other people who like love Malibu Rising, me being one of them, and do not like 7 Husbands. It's about this famous actress, Evelyn Hugo, and she seeks out this magazine reporter, Monique Grant. Evelyn is specifically asked for Monique to write a memoir or book, basically, about Evelyn's life. And there's like this big charity gala coming up, and Evelyn was supposed to like take pictures with Monique's magazine, but she's like, I'm not taking pictures. I'm giving you the story of my life. I want you to write it, and you can sell the book and make money off of it. And by the time the book sells, I will be dead. The whole book, you're kind of like, why did she choose Monique? And even Monique, who the story is really being told from Monique's perspective, but it goes back and forth between past and present. It kind of goes with the present, where Monique is sitting down with Evelyn at Evelyn's house each day, and Evelyn's like literally just telling her word for word like what happened to her. And it's also going back to the past and talking about things through Evelyn's perspective as she's living through these experiences that she's telling Monique about. And she talks about, obviously, hence the title, her 7 different husbands, one of them being Mick Riva, the singer who's in Malibu Rising. Also, quick little fun fact, the lady who worked at Chick-fil-A actually saw me reading this book in the car, and she told me that this book, or like the inspiration for Evelyn Hugo, is actually based off of Taylor Elizabeth, a famous actress who had 7 husbands. That honestly kind of made me appreciate the book a little bit more, because I thought it was so like interesting that she had 7 husbands. But I do think like knowing that it's based off of Elizabeth Taylor's life, it did make me appreciate the book a little bit more, like really trying to give like Elizabeth Taylor a little bit of a a little nudge of like, hey, like, I see you, I see you. The book also kind of gets chopped up where there's like articles that are kind of like stuck in and out of the book that provide a little more context as to what's happening. There's this supposed huge plot twist, but I actually predicted the plot twist at the very beginning of the book. So I don't know. I actually gave this book a 3 out of 10. Also, this book put me in a huge book slump. I started this in February and literally finished it in April, and normally I read a book in 3 days. I just found it really hard to get into this book, which I have heard from both people who liked the book and didn't like the book. I just felt like it was a very slow start. This book is also very long. I didn't connect to any of the characters really, which I don't have to connect with all the characters to like a book, but I definitely think it helps in my like own opinion if I can connect with the characters, even if it's not like completely connect with them, but if I can connect with them in some way, I enjoy the book more because I'm more invested in the character and I want to find out what happens with them. I definitely did write a ton of quotes down from this book because Taylor Jenkins Reid does have a way with words. But overall, I didn't like the structure of the book because it wasn't very clear to me like when we would go from the past to the present. And so sometimes I would literally get halfway through a chapter and realize that Evelyn is talking to Monique. I also didn't like when the articles from like Evelyn Hugo's day were being thrown in there. It kind of, I don't know, it just like, to me it didn't add anything. I didn't like the writing. Like I felt like the writing was just telling a story and I kind of got bored. I really tried to push myself through this book and finish it just because so many people were like, it gets better, it gets better. It did not get better for me. Next book, I decided to give Taylor Jenkins Reid another try because I did really like Malibu Rising and I thought that might have been a fluke. So I went on to read Maybe in Another Life. I actually gave this book an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed it and it definitely got me out of my book slump. I did finish this book pretty quickly. It was overall like a pretty easy read. This book follows the main character, Hannah Martin. So she is 29 years old and she's moving back to LA. She kind of doesn't know what to do with her life, hence why she's moving back to LA to kind of like figure things out and figure out what she wants to do with her life and how to turn her life around because she just doesn't like where she's at right now. To celebrate her being back in LA, her like childhood best friend Gabby invites her out to a bar where she runs into her high school ex-boyfriend named Ethan. The book then converges into 2 separate concurrent storylines. On the one hand is Gabby, her friend that she went to the bar with, says to Hannah, like, are you ready to go home? And in that like plot line, the converging plot line, Hannah says yes and leaves with Gabby. And the other plot line is Ethan had offered, if Hannah wanted to stay later at the bar, Ethan offers to drive her home. So that second plot line is following Hannah going home with Ethan. So what I really like about this book is it kind of plays with the ideas of like fate, destiny, and the multiverse, which are all things that I literally love. Those are like intellectual conversations that I like. It was very interesting to see these plot lines like taking place at the same time. So obviously after that night, the book kind of splits into 2 and it follows like what happens when she leaves with Gabby and what happens when she leaves with Ethan. And in both of these plot lines, Hannah manages to find who she believes is the one, like the guy for her. So I think it's also very interesting to follow like the 2 different romances that develop and kind of see like how those take place and how they play out. I thought what also was very interesting is that Taylor Jenkins Reid does kind of make some ripples in there. There are some elements that happen in both plot lines, not necessarily at the same time, but with the same outcome, which really makes you kind of think about like how true is the idea of fate or destiny, and is it, you know, is there really such a thing as fate or destiny, or is it just sheer coincidence that like this happened? Especially with the ending, it really just made me think about like my life. I feel like I also could relate to the characters really well because I'm a college student. I'm about to be a junior in college, so like I'm halfway through my college experience and I'm kind of at that point in my life where I'm like, what do I want to do after college? Like, what am I trying to do with the rest of my life? So I feel like I could really relate to Hannah in the sense of like not really knowing what to do. It really just made me think, and I personally love books that leave you like questioning things and like rethinking your life. Yeah, I gave this book an 8 out of 10 and kind of restored my Taylor Jenkins Reid thought. Next book I tried to read, unfortunately I could not get into this book, is Astrid Sees All. The main reason I couldn't get into it is the writing just felt very elementary. I will say also, like, I didn't like that the book has a table of contents. Like, I don't know, it just kind of reminded me of the books I would read in elementary school where there's a table of contents. And the titles kind of give away what happens in the chapter. And then I'm like, literally in the middle of the chapters, it'll just split. I don't know if you can see that. And then all of a sudden it's like the next day, and then it splits, and it's the next day. So this book is kind of structured like a, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, rather than just like taking you through it by showing you with explanation, description, detail. It kind of just felt like I was reading a list of like someone recounting what happened to them. This book is supposed to follow Phoebe Hayes, who joins her friend Carmen, and they live in the Lower East Side of New York. She is trying to confront Ivan, the older man who wronged her. It says that this book is about female friendship, sex and romance, and what it's like to be a young woman on the brink of self-destruction and self-discovery. And I can't really give it a rating because I didn't read it. I tried to, I really did. Another great book. Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste. This also got made into a Hulu series, but it's definitely not as like accurate to the book as like Normal People was. I genuinely love this book. This is the first book I gave a 10 out of 10. Little Fires Everywhere takes place in Shaker Heights, Ohio, which is basically the suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, and it's a real place, and everything in Shaker Heights is planned to a T. Like, literally in this town, they have rules about how far away your garbage can be from the road. But the book basically follows two different families. So it follows the Warrens, Mia Warren and Pearl Warren. So Mia is a single mom and Mia is an artist. Pearl, her daughter, who I believe is 16 when the book starts out, her and Pearl have been traveling a lot. They've kind of been like nomads, like they've lived a bunch of different places because Mia basically moves to a new place to get inspiration for her artwork, and then once she finishes a piece, they pack everything up in their little car and they hit the road and move to the next place. But when they land in Shaker Heights, Mia makes a promise to Pearl that they will stay there because Pearl is a 16-year-old girl. She's kind of tired of moving around. Pearl ends up meeting Moody Richardson and the whole Richardson family. So there's Elena Richardson, who's the mother. There's Lexi, Tripp, and Izzy. Those are the 4 kids. I forgot again. Elena Richardson is kind of like the pinnacle of Shaker Heights, Ohio. She is very much the like stick to it. The book kind of follows like the interweaving of these two families, and Elena Richardson actually happens to be a reporter, and as things start to kind of get more involved, like Mia actually begins working for the Richardsons as like a house assistant because she wants to be able to be closer to Pearl, who's getting very close to the Richardson kids, and Mia's kind of wary of it because she sees that the Richardsons are white, they're very privileged, they just live a very different life than Pearl, and she doesn't like that Pearl is getting attached to them. Mrs. Richardson, on the other hand, does not mind, but she does not like Mia, and being a reporter, she starts to dig into Mia's past. I loved this book mainly because of the writing, the plot, the character development in this book. Like, there are clear character development where you can literally see the thought process of these characters as they're making decisions. The way that the book is written, I can see why they made it into a TV show because the book is so descriptive that you can visualize everything. The book does do a little bit of alternating between past and present, but I think the main reason I love this book is because of how closely connected it was to me. Like, Shaker Heights is so similar to my hometown in Connecticut. I literally underlined so many things in this book because there were so many quotes where I was like, oh, this literally explains like this person in my town. I just found so many connections between this book. This book also deals a lot with like racism and like social injustices and stuff like that. And there's like this whole trial that's going on in the town amidst like everything with the Warrens and the Richardsons, which makes the book so much better, but it also relates so much more to my hometown. Like, I could see myself in Pearl and like everything she was going through. I could see myself in Mia. I could see like my friend's parents and some of the Richardsons. It literally touched my soul, and it's like a book that I want to like give to everyone in my town and be like, this is why y'all have these issues and this book will solve them. I think I finished this book in a day because I literally stayed up and like till like 3 a.m. trying to finish it. It was amazing. Next, we're reaching our Emily Henry era. This is People We Meet on Vacation. First of all, the covers. Can we talk about the covers on her books? Like, so fun. I gave this book an 8.5 out of 10. So I did really like this book. This book follows the lives of Alex and Poppy. The way that they meet is like they met on the first day at orientation, and then later on they both realize that they're from the same hometown, I believe back in somewhere in the Midwest. But they decide to drive home from school over winter break to their hometown, and that's kind of how they like learn more about each other and first kind of develop their friendship. Poppy and Alex are both very different people. Poppy kind of has like this very big personality. She wears a lot of like bright clothes, and Alex is the opposite in the sense that he is like very organized. He's kind of a germaphobe. He drives the speed limit. I don't know anyone who drives the speed limit, but you can kind of see how it's like an opposites attract situation. Alex and Poppy, because of how different they are, they quickly realize on their drive home that the one thing they have in common that they can relate to is that they both like to travel. So they strike up an agreement to go on a summer vacation together every year. Poppy is a writer, and eventually her blog, her travel blog, gets a bigger following. She actually becomes a writer for the magazine, and through the magazine, she gets sent on like these luxury trips that her and Alex can go on. The book starts with 5 summers ago, which is the last summer that they went on a vacation together, I believe. And then it kind of counts down from then, but it alternates back and forth between each summer ago. So it starts with 5 summers ago, and then it goes to this summer. And then it goes to 4 summers ago, this summer, 3 summers ago, this summer, 2 summers ago, this summer. Which I really like the way that the book is structured like that, because it kind of keeps you engaged. It's been 2 years since they've talked, so you're kind of counting down until the last summer that they had went on a trip together. This book is basically like friends to lovers. Alex and Poppy kind of develop their own separate relationships, but it's very clear from the beginning that they both like each other. I also think like the relationship that Alex and Poppy have is very realistic. There's a lot of miscommunication. There's a lot of like not being honest about one another's feelings for each other, and I think that's very realistic, especially as adults. Like once you become adults, I feel like it's so much harder to be like honest and real, but it's also so important in adult relationships because there's a lot more at stake. The reason why I kind of took off like 1.5 points is I personally didn't connect with either of the characters. Like I related to Poppy in some senses of like not really enjoying her hometown and not having a good experience, and I related to Alex in the sense of like he likes organization, he likes order, he doesn't like to always be spontaneous and loud and all that stuff. And so I didn't like connect fully to either of the characters, but I was very invested in their relationship, which kept me engaged. Other thing that I didn't really like about this book is I feel like on Poppy's end, there just wasn't a lot of character development. It was kind of rushed at the end, whereas with Alex, I definitely could see like him growing as an adult. People We Meet on Vacation, Emily Henry. Very good book. So we have another summer-themed book. This is The Summer of Unbroken Rules by K.L. Walther. I actually really like this book. So I initially gave it a 6 out of 10, but I feel like I could give it a 7 out of 10. This book follows Meredith Fox. She also did just break up with her boyfriend, and she's about to go to college. She just graduated high school. The Fox family has like this giant mass of land in Martha's Vineyard, and the whole family every summer spends, I think, like a couple of weeks out there, and they all have like different houses. What I also really like about this book is because it is a pretty big family, they actually give you in the front like this little diagram like of the family and like how everyone's related, which I definitely reference back to as I read. 2 summers ago, Meredith's older sister Claire died tragically in a car accident. So Meredith's immediate family, her and her parents, have not been to the vineyard in 2 years since Claire has died, because Claire was the one who really loved being on the vineyard, and every summer they would play assassin, and Claire was like the assassin queen. But I love that like the whole family's involved in playing assassin. This summer they go back to Martha's Vineyard because Meredith's cousin Sarah is getting married. Sarah's like in-laws family is there, and so are the whole entire Fox family. So Meredith ends up meeting Whit, who is the younger brother of the groom, and Whit, I believe, is like a freshman in college, but he's thinking about transferring schools, and they kind of develop a friendship, develops into a relationship, so it's friends to lovers. I really like seeing like the friendship that developed between them two. The romance between Whit and Meredith did feel very naive and almost like a fantasy. And this book also takes place in the case of a week. And I was like, that definitely is not going to happen. I like the way it's written. It also makes you laugh. I think this is definitely like a good, quick summer read. I could not put this down. I literally stayed up late at night reading this book. I'm going to change my ranking to a 7 out of 10 just because I so would reread this book, and it was like just so wholesome. Like it just reminds me of like what I wanted in high school for like a summer romance. We have Beach Read, Emily Henry. I think it's like enemies to friends to lovers. This book follows Augustus in January. So basically Augustus and January, or Gus, know each other from college, and they're kind of like rivals because they're both, I think, writing majors. Gus actually writes literary fiction, and January writes romance fiction novels. So they have 2 very different paths because Gus's books are very like about cults and the deep dark secrets of life, and January's is like happy romance. Throughout college they are kind of like rivals, but also not really rivals. Both are in a lot of the same writing classes and kind of competing for the same acclamations and accomplishments, but they both kind of like go back and forth. So like one year Gus will win, the next year January wins. January's father has passed away, and in his will she leaves to her his beach house, but it's actually on a lake in Michigan. January decides that she's going to go to this house and sell it because she does not want anything to do with it, and she decides she's going to stay there for the summer because she also has a deadline to meet for her publisher by the end of the summer. January has nothing. Gus, she finds out, is her next door neighbor in Michigan. He lives in the house next door by himself, and he also has a deadline to make, and also has writer's block. So the two kind of reconnect, and they actually strike up this deal where they are going to switch genres. So Gus is going to write a romance book, and January is going to write a literary fiction book. They set up these dates to kind of help each other get a feel for what to write. Throughout the book, you can kind of see them start to, lose that enemy competition. I love this book. I give it a 10 out of 10. Thing that I love the most is like, I love the way it's written, and I love how realistic it is. Like, they fall in love over the course of the summer. I think it's also realistic that like, it's kind of like a second chance romance because they did like each other in college, but like neither one clearly communicated that. There's a lot of communication between the two. I think both of them are kind of hesitant at first. Also just a sucker for good enemies to lovers. There was a good amount of character development on both ends. Definitely recommend reading it. Last book is Transcendent Kingdom. This is by Gyasi. I'm so sorry if I'm saying that wrong. This is actually the last book of June that I tried to read, but I could not get into it. I feel really bad. The back says, Gifty is a 6th-year PhD candidate in neuroscience at Stanford University School of Medicine, studying reward-seeking behavior in mice and neural circuits of depression and addiction. Her brother, Nana, was a gifted high school athlete who died of a heroin overdose after an ankle injury left him hooked on OxyContin. Her suicidal mother is living in her bed. Gifty is determined to discover the scientific basis for the suffering she sees all around her. But even as she turns to the hard sciences to unlock the mystery of her family's loss, she finds herself hungering for her childhood faith and grappling with the evangelical church in which she was raised, whose promise of salvation remains as tantalizing as it is elusive. I thought I would really enjoy this book because I myself am someone who's like very much into science, especially astronomy, but I also am a spiritual person. I also was raised Catholic. I felt like I could relate a lot to Gifty in the sense of like wanting to find answers for like things that are going on in her life. And I did really like the book. I just couldn't keep reading it because every now and again the book would get very into the science of like what Gifty was discovering, and it took me out of the book, if that makes sense. Once again, book alternates between past and present. I swear I did not mean for like most of these books to be past and present books. It alternates to like during her childhood, before her dad is out of the picture, before her brother dies of addiction, before her mom is clinically and chronically depressed. And it also alternates between the present, where she's trying to take care of her mom and also conduct her research to kind of find answers for the things that have happened. I liked the book in that sense. Like, I liked reading about her past, but I almost wish the book was just told like from past to present rather than alternating, because I found that the chapters about the present were a bit weaker. They weren't as detailed, and like I said, they focused a lot more on like the research she was doing and explaining the science behind her findings, which I can appreciate the science. Like, I can tell that the author definitely did their research or knows their stuff about the science that Gifty is researching, but I don't really like science books. Yeah, I unfortunately don't have a rating for that. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Comment down below what books you've read this year that you think I should read next, because I'm always going to Barnes & Noble and I'd love to know what y'all are reading and what I should read. You can also feel free to follow me on Instagram at Dineo_Lyle, because I have an Instagram highlight titled books. So that's where you can keep up to date with like what I'm currently reading. And I will see you all in my next video. Happy reading! You're beautiful.